Welcome to another episode of InRange. This is the October 2022 Q&A. All these questions provided by amazing Patreon supporters. Just a reminder that InRange is completely proactively demonetized. We receive no income from YouTube, YouTube Red, any form of monetization through advertising at all whatsoever. No masters, no gods, no overlords. In that regard, it is completely you, the viewer, that keep InRange alive. And if you'd like to support InRange, you can do that at patreon.com/InRangeTV or via Utreon. But we generate no advertising revenue for YouTube. They are ultimately the adversary to many kinds of content creators, not just firearms related. Let's go ahead and get going with the questions. Amon B. Is there a particular type of black powder firearm you would recommend for someone just starting out? Or perhaps one you would recommend against? You know, I feel like almost everyone that starts off with black powder goes with the Remington New Model Army revolver. And it's not a bad choice. It's got a top strap. And it's a pretty reliable gun that is less inclined to cap jams than, say, the Colt. Once you get a Colt running, though, the Colt's better than the Remington, in my opinion. But the Colt takes a little more effort to get really going with it. That said, I don't know that a revolver is actually the best choice for anyone starting off with a black powder firearm. There are extra things you have to worry about with revolvers that you don't with, say, a single shot. You have to worry about chain fires. You have to worry about proper cap size more. You have to worry about sealing the chambers, loading five chambers or 6 chambers, all these things that come up. And of course, with the Remington, you can actually lock the hammer down between chambers on a cylinder, but that's neither here nor there right now. I think if you're just starting off, you don't want to do a flintlock. Flintlocks require an extra level of alchemy. Flintlocks can be amazing once you learn how to use them, but don't start with a flintlock. I think a single shot percussion rifle of some sort, or even shotgun, is a good starting choice. Although shotguns, I should say smoothbore, which can be used as a shotgun, are probably your best choices. Like some sort of Kentucky or Pennsylvania rifle, or smoothbores are even easier in that regard. A smoothbore percussion ignition firearm or black powder gun is going to be the easiest way to get the ball rolling, pun intended, than any other thing. Once you get that figured out and you're using it reliably, which is not hard to do with a smoothbore percussion gun, and there's lots of reproductions on the market. I'm not going to start naming them because there's just too many to go through. Then maybe start looking at a revolver or something like that. I think the reason people look at revolvers is because they're frankly lower cost. They tend to be reasonably priced. Like you can get a black powder percussion revolver probably for around 300 something bucks. I mean, maybe even less if it's used. But I think you're better off with some form of long arm that is percussion ignition, and a smooth bore is even easier than patched round ball. Patched round ball brings some other challenges like getting the ball stuck or an oversized ball or things like that. So frankly, it's probably not the most exotic thing, but look into that. You can also look at the modern stuff like inline and all that, but I don't care about the modern inline muzzle loaders. I just don't. Those things are around for specific reasons to like achieve the ability to hunt during muzzle loading season and bring like almost modern capabilities to a muzzleloader, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that, but I don't care about that. When I think about a black powder firearm, I think about historic black powder firearms. Now that I think about it, we talk black powder firearm, and I don't know why I immediately went to flintlock or percussion. Another great option are cartridge black powder firearms. So an 1873 trapdoor Springfield is a fantastic black powder firearm. And yes, a lot of people shoot modern powder through them, but you're better off shooting black powder through them. So another thing to think about, if you want to like do the slow transition, is to go with a cartridge-based black powder firearm. Probably, I mean, there are reproductions that can, of course, use modern powder, or you can get originals, but there's nothing wrong with taking in a reproduction 1873 and loading black powder yourself. One of the things you're going to know though, is that if you're doing black powder, and you're doing black powder cartridge, you're going to become a black powder cartridge reloader because you're not going to be buying black powder cartridges off the market. And if you find them preloaded for you, they're going to be so cost prohibitive, you're not going to want them anyway. So here's the caveats. Flintlock, hard to learn, don't bother with that. Revolvers, cheaper, but require a little extra effort. If you're going to go with a revolver, a Colt 1860 or a Remington New Model Army, always referred to as the 1858, are not a bad choice, but remind you, you're going to have to learn some things about replacing the cones with probably slick shot. You're going to have to learn some stuff to get them to run reliably. A smooth bore percussion muzzle loader is going to be the easiest thing to get started with. A rifled musket or rifle like a Pennsylvania or Kentucky that's percussion will be the next step harder. And a cartridge-based black powder firearm are going to be essentially function very much like what you're used to with a modern gun, but you're going to have to learn to reload black powder cartridges, which is another thing because different lube, bullets, all that stuff come into that. So, I guess I'm going to go with, in full circle, once again, a percussion ignition smoothbore muzzleloader. Z. I noticed in some of the comments of your Inkstat video that someone asked you about how push sling shooting compared to cheek pistol shooting. And while I can't remember exactly what you said, it was clear that you disliked the cheek pistol method. Can you go more into detail about what you consider to be the cheek pistol method's downsides? And I got two questions like this. Jarrett M. What, if anything, does the cheek pistol concept accomplish that can't already be done with the MP5K push-pull-sling method? I don't mean to be controversial with this. The cheek pistol thing that we're seeing going around right now, to me, seems to be mostly a range trick. I have not seen anyone attempt to use it on the clock. I have not seen anyone do anything with it besides create videos with it in a static environment, not on the clock, not on the timer, not under stress, trying to move to like dynamic positions or do things like that, and then engage. Until we get some testing done like that with that cheek pistol method, it is, I have a hard time thinking of it anything other than a range trick. Now, what we're seeing here though between the push-pull-sling method and the cheek pistol method is that if you have a properly zeroed red dot with minimal parallax, it doesn't really matter what method you use to get the red dot on the target when you press the trigger and set off the round, that if the dot is on the target when the round goes off, you're going to hit the target. Now, of course, the best and easiest way to do that is with a stock. But when we can't have a stock, we're now looking at some alternative ideas. One is, of course, just to hold it out there, which provides no stability whatsoever. And the push-pull-sling method and the cheek pistol method are methods to stabilize a pistol or something without a stock, to be able to provide quicker follow-up shots, but also get the dot on the target more stably. And I think a red dot is quintessential to this. When the SAS did this with their MP5s, they used the flashlight kind of like a red dot because they zeroed the flashlight to where they were trying to hit with. But by modern standards, both the cheek pistol and the push-pull-sling really are red dot methods. But the cheek pistol thing takes preparation. You got to bring it up. You got to get your hand on there. Got to get behind it. There's issues with recoil that if you have a gun that recoils too severely, it's going to hurt you. The ejection port is going to be a problem. You can't cheek pistol a gun that has a reciprocating slide unless you have some way to keep your cheek off the reciprocating slide. There's a lot of stuff around this that don't make sense to me personally. And it feels like, and there's nothing wrong with range tricks. Range tricks are cool, but to me it's a range trick. It's a square range trick. And until we really put it to the test, or someone puts it to the test in the match, on the clock, in a training environment, or in a brutality match, I'm going to write it off as a range trick. The push-pull-sling method is somewhat of a range trick, but less so of one. You can push the gun out from you. You can stabilize in more dynamic positions. As you saw, I was even able to use it prone while on the ground. The cheek pistol thing isn't going to really work very well for unorthodox positions, like a VTEC barricade is going to wreck shop, for lack of a better term, on the cheek pistol method, and that is not the case with the push-pull-sling method. But ultimately, both of these are a workaround to the right answer, which is to have a stock. And there are times when you can't have a stock, like the SAS needed it for their raid, and of course with pistols that have not been SBR'd yet for an actual stock. So if you want to do a range trick, I think cheek pistol method seems pretty cool. Requires some extra work to get it to work at all. The push-pull-sling method will work on anything that you can mount a sling to the rear of, and the push-pull-sling method has a much more dynamic tactical application, while the cheek pistol is, I can't see it as anything more than gee whiz cool. But I guess we'll have to find out over time. Alex, What was your thought process for requiring a knife in brutality divisions, and do you have any plans for stage designs that require use of it? Quite simply, we incorporated the knife to be more aligned with the TST division in Finland and Finnish brutality, I believe. That was one of the reasons. And so there's been a little bit of an effort to make the armored division align more with the Finnish TST reservist shooting divisions, just so there's consistency there, considering we run a brutality match in Finland. But also the reason for acquiring a knife in other divisions is because knives make sense in the field, and they are a military applicable tool, not necessarily for combat, but for carrying. And that was why. And also in a brutality event, being required to carry extra gear, especially gear that's viable in the field, like a knife, makes sense. Because if you learn where to place the knife on your body, so that when you're crawling through weird positions or under cars or over things, you'll learn how to have your gear set up where the knife won't be in the way. Will we ever have plans for a stage that requires the use of it? There have been stages that require the use of it, but this is really funny. One of the most dangerous things I've ever tried to do at any match, whether it was two-gun or brutality or otherwise, was incorporate the use of a weapon that was not a gun in the competition. People are very cognizant of the firearms. They know how you handle them safely. They know the 180. They know to keep their finger off the trigger, etc. But the minute you bring out a blade, whether it's a knife or a sword or a bow or a crossbow, things go south fast. Knives get real dangerous real fast, especially when people are trying to rush using the knife on the clock. So as a result, I have really stayed away from using blades, swords, and now bows, because there was a story about that someday, in any form of competition, because one, people aren't necessarily proficient with them, as weird as that sounds. Additionally, trying to rush anything with a knife under the clock no one got really hurt, but it was presenting an opportunity to be very hurt. So I have really stopped designing stages that require the use of the knife. Falling steel. It appears you have an iPhone 12 Pro. How often do you update phones, and how thrilling is the caseless life? You're right, I do, and you're quite observant. I only upgrade the phones based on the quality of the camera upgrade in the new version. My phones really are cameras that are also phones or devices that do other things, and so I only really care about the camera upgrades. If the camera is not upgraded, I probably don't care to upgrade. So that's really it. I use my iPhones extensively for photography and video, and if the camera is not upgraded sufficiently, there's not really a reason for me to upgrade the device. So that's the reason and when I upgrade. As for the caseless life, well, I want the biggest phone possible with the largest screen real estate, but I don't want it to be very bulky. So the largest phone left without a case means that it fits in my pocket better. It's easier to transport. It's easier to put into a carrier or some sort of tripod stand. Cases get in the way of that. And so cases also get in the way of installing, like inserting adapters, like an external microphone, for example. So I just don't do cases. And for the most part, it has not burned me. I'm very careful. I'm generally careful and cautious with my devices. And I have shattered a screen, I think, once or twice in the entire time I've been using them. So it's not something I do or break very often. I do put a glass protector over the front screen, but that's, of course, not a case. So I don't find it to be that concerning, and I find these cases to be unergonomic and gross. Patrick J. Would a self-hosted, meaning you own the server, open source, free software version of PracticeScore be ideal over PracticeScore? What features would make that ideal? No, it would not. PracticeScore is good because PracticeScore is something that everyone can use. You can go there as a centralized resource of matches and competitions and sign up for them based on region, match, ranges hosting them. You can see scores across the board. You can compare scores. It builds a database over time of a lot of different things. PracticeScore, in spite of its very kludgy user interface, is the best tool now. You could potentially make a better one in terms of a user interface that's hosted on your own server, but it would lose all the benefits of being an aggregate community tool. PracticeScore is a good aggregate community tool, and in its aggregation brings something to the table that's beneficial above and beyond just the tool itself. So no, this is an instance in which I don't think hosting it yourself would necessarily be useful. Tim K. What conflict or person story would you like to see a Band of Brothers type miniseries about? This is super easy for me. It's an Old West character. I've mentioned it before on the channel. I would love to see a miniseries about the life of Mickey Free. Mickey Free is the child that was abducted by a certain tribe in southern Arizona that ultimately was blamed on Cochise and Cochise's tribe. And in the process, he did not have Mickey Free. And in the Felix Ward was his name before he became Mickey Free. And that turned into, of course, decades of warfare with the, quote, Apache tribes. So in that regard, and he became a fascinating person. He was part Irish, part Mexican, was raised in an Apache tribe, grew up to become essentially a bounty hunter and mercenary, a fascinating, depressed, dark human being who didn't know where he existed in society. He didn't know if he was American or Apache or, of course, Native American, but I meant like as in the USA, or what his identity should be. And so he struggled for his entire existence and did a lot of brutal things, survived a lot of brutal things, and he would be a fascinating miniseries. Will we ever see one? Probably not, because that's not the stuff that Hollywood does, and if they did, they'd probably screw it up anyways. But when you say Band of Brothers, that does change my opinion a little bit, because Band of Brothers was amazing. It was a wonderful, wonderful miniseries. And if they were to do the quality like they did with Band of Brothers for Mickey Free, Felix Ward, that would be a really epic thing to watch. Dalbanowski. The Mosin Nagant has a cocking knob. Enfields have a cocking knob. The Springfield, which is a Mauser 1893, has a cocking knob. Why does the Mauser 98 not have a cocking knob? 8mm can misfire too. Well, yes, of course it can. But I think this is more simply answered by, I mean, some of these don't fall into this, but like the Enfield, for example, that's cock on close, means that when it fires, you have to kind of open the bolt all the way, which would eject the round and cycle it to recock if there wasn't a cocking knob. Now, of course, the Mosin Nagant isn't this, but that said, the Mauser 98 is cock on open. So that means if you were to pull the trigger and it goes click, you literally just open the bolt, close the bolt. You don't open it and then cycle it. You just open it, close it, and you've recocked the action. So adding a cocking knob to a cock on close action is, in my opinion, extra parts for no reason. The Mosin Nagant uses the cocking knob also as the safety, air quotes, which is a terrible safety, but it's there, and that's part of the reason it has it. But the Mauser 98 with its cock on close action doesn't need a cocking knob, because if you were to misfire a round and didn't want to just eject it, although I would argue if the round misfired, you might want to just eject it and go to the next round. But if you wanted to try a secondary strike on a misfired round, open the action, close the action, and you've recocked it. So you can now double strike the cartridge that's in the chamber. But more often than not, you're better off cycling the action and ejecting the round that was in there, in my opinion. But I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's the answer to me. It just doesn't need one. Joe S. If you could make one change to humans, what would it be and why? That's a broad question. I think that I would try to instill more empathy into us in general. We are empathy would go a long way. Rational thought goes a long way, and it's something that we're lacking across significant swaths of humanity. I don't know if that's a learned behavior or an intrinsic one. Maybe some people have more of it than others, but if I could change one thing, I would add empathy, because empathy would go towards us caring about the other people in our community more. And doing that changes everything. Patrick T. Second time asking, why are there no more exposed hammer pump shotguns? Seems like an easy way to shorten the action and show when the gun is ready to fire. I think the exposed hammer just introduces another possible failure point. Dirt and debris can get into the action through a exposed hammer. Dirt and debris can get between the hammer and the firing pin. It does mean the firing pin is probably technically, is exposed in a way where It would be really odd, but if it was to be struck, it could fire. If you were to drop the gun, the hammer could strike the ground and maybe break its sear and fire. I think an internalized hammer on a modern gun reduces exposure of action to dirt and debris and failure. It also actually increases the safety because it is much less likely, you'd have to have a significant jarring event for it to go off if it were to strike the ground, unlike an exposed hammer, which when striking the ground at just the right way can break a sear and fire. So I think it's as simple as that. Less exposed surfaces for failure and safer. Bones 870. How do you handle being a Second Amendment advocate while not sharing the religious or political opinions of a majority of gun owners? Thanks for the music references last month. Well, you're welcome for the music references. How do you do that? You just do you. You do your reality and your truth. Just because the majority has an opinion on anything, firearms or otherwise, majority opinion does not mean correct. Majority opinion just means majority. Majority opinion can also be the mob, and the mob can also be wrong, and frequently is wrong. In fact, more often than not is wrong. So you have to be comfortable with, in life, I would say in general, whether it's firearms or other topics, to be able to and be willing to take a minority opinion stance in a world filled with shitty opinions of majority groups. So if just because the vast majority believes this and it's the wrong thing to believe, you don't go with the wrong thing to believe to be in the majority. You have to take the minority stance and face the consequences of that. I don't see any other way to live. The idea of going along with something that I see as an incorrect or wrong narrative or a inappropriate majority opinion is awful to me. I would not feel good about myself, and I wouldn't feel good about people around me doing that either. Does it become isolating and difficult to take a minority opinion stance in a world filled with delusion and lack of empathy and bigotry? Yes, it does. But at the same time, it opens the door to meeting better people and creating a community around you that are not those people. So that's how you deal with it. You do the right thing. You don't waver from what you believe to be the right thing. And in the process, you hopefully create a community of friends and family and people around you that are also willing to do the right thing in the face of a majority opinion that is frequently bigoted or the wrong thing. And what I mean by that is I'm not trying to say, for example, don't read into this, that I'm saying that being a Christian gun owner is the wrong thing. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that this question to me is more about how do you deal with being a minority opinion in a majority environment that is other than you. And you have to be you. You have to be your honest self. And if you're not, the best way and only comfortable way for me is to be me. And that will come with, if that comes with repercussions, then so be it. Kyle P. What has been your favorite challenging choice of a gun for a competition and why? I've done so many weird guns. I really had a lot of fun with the Sharps, the paper cartridge Sharps. Just because it's like kind of a cartridge, but not really quite a cartridge yet. That's a good time. Actually, I've really enjoyed shooting all the Civil War early carbines that I've done so far in matches. Those have been fun. And I think I will be doing more of those when I can, because it takes a lot of time to make, let's say, 200 rounds of weird oddball ammunition, etc., and succeed with it, whatever succeed means, i.e. even get through a match. But the paper cartridge Sharps was fun, Maynard's fun. Hopefully we'll see more. I will do more Civil War cartridge guns and Civil War weapons, and I think I have a lot of fun with that the most. But are they challenging? Yes, they're challenging. Jordan W. Muzzle loading competitions I have seen tend to be very static, or at best a slow-paced woods walk, moving at a light jag between targets. Any thoughts on how to make muzzle loading competitions more exciting? Yes, make them time-based. You might want to look into the NSSA, the North-South Skirmish Association. they've done some of this. They have static lines, and they have like a timed, like a race between one squad and another about who can eliminate clay pigeons the fastest, and that division wins when all their clay pigeons are gone, which turns it into a much more dynamic and exciting environment. It also adds like a race condition of reloading the gun under time and stress, which is something missing from a lot of stuff. So the NSSA actually already kind of does that. The reason you see what you're seeing there, though, is that the majority of people that want to shoot a muzzle loading competition don't want to do time-based or stress-type shooting. They want that. And this is one of those challenges. A lot of the times, the minority of us that really like those or love those old guns and want to see them more used in a more dynamic fashion are the minority. The people that own these guns don't really want to use them that way, and the people that want to shoot the way we're talking about don't usually own those guns. That's the challenge. Isaac G. I've seen a lot of discussion around whether the 50 grain Varmint Predator hollow points are a viable self-defense round. One side argues that it doesn't have the penetration necessary according to the FBI to perform well, and the other argues that it shouldn't be evaluated on this metric as it's designed to dump energy on impact, and that it's less likely to go through walls. Do you have any thoughts either way? Well, when we're talking about going through walls, we're talking about CQB, we're talking about home defense, we're talking about doing this. This is a home defense rifle, or carbine. I think we get really caught up in some nonsense here sometimes. Obviously, a varmint round isn't going to penetrate body armor, but neither is any normal 5.56. And I'm going to just go ahead and say this, and I know it's going to be controversial because anything about this always is, and I'm not a ballistician, but here's the deal. If you shoot anyone with 5.56, whether it's a 50 grain varmint round or a 62 grain M855 or M193 or some other whiz-bang thing in the confines of a house, you're going to cause a significant problem for the person hit with that round. 5.56 is a powerful round, and in distances like across a room, I don't really care if it's a 50 grain varmint round that the FBI says will not penetrate sufficiently, or a M855, it's gonna have an effect. As for if it's better or worse or whatever, I think you're just fine. Now, if you're loading in some, I mean, I'm sure there are rounds that are like, obviously blanks aren't going to be effective, or things like that, and I wouldn't advise necessarily frangibles per se, but at the same time, I cannot see how a varmint or predator round fired across the distance of a room as a self-defense gun is not going to do the job. I think this is people being pedantic and talking about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, and they're forgetting the idea that we're talking about shooting a person with 5.56 essentially 10 feet away. Jeremy, second or third time asking, sorry. Putting aside any historical value considerations and thinking purely as a shooter, would an M1 carbine have any advantages over a short AR-15 chambered in .30 carbine? No, I can't think of any advantages that would have. I do not think highly of the M1 carbine. I think even less of the .30 carbine round. I wouldn't want a .30 carbine round in an M1 carbine or in an AR-15, and the M1 carbine has demonstrably less effective ergonomics than an AR-15. Even if you were to say the .30 carbine round is awesome, I want a .30 carbine round, and you chambered an AR-15 in a .30 carbine round, I don't know why you wouldn't want the AR-15 instead of the M1. The M1's ergonomics aren't as good, the sights aren't as good, and the recoil impulse is better in AR-15 as well. It's a direct inline impulse, which is not the case with the M1. So, no, the M1 carbine would not have any advantage that I can think of over an AR-15 regardless. Henry S. Are we ever going to see a two-man brutality event, something like Tiger Valley? Maybe. It's not on the radar at the moment, but we're always being very dynamic with the brutality events, and it's possible that someday we would whip something like that out. The problem with two-man or team events is that it's very hard to get people signed up. Because if you sign up, you call up your buddy and you're like, hey, let's go do this. They're like, yeah, cool. And then inevitably, the failure rate of that is immense because one or the other has to drop out, and now you have a problem because you're signed up for an event without your teammate. And as we see already, a lot of people, when the event is announced, sign up, and then 1 month before the event's out, they suddenly ask for a refund because something happened in life. You know, that does happen. Medical health conditions, work issues, whatever. But if you try to make a team event that, guess what? The failure rate's going to be exponentially worse. So maybe, but I don't know how we would lock it in a way that it wouldn't have that problem. Kevin B., if you had to choose, would it be the food of New Orleans or the Southwest, or why? New Orleans for me. Southwestern food's great. I love New Mexican food. New Mexican food in particular, I love it. New Mexican style Mexican food is one of my favorite things on earth. But Southwestern food is great, and it is dynamic and unique and interesting, but New Orleans brings more to the table. New Orleans has both Cajun and Creole style cooking that have combined. You have influences, of course, from around the world for good and bad reasons. French, Spanish, African, because of the enslaved peoples. And all of that has combined into a unique form of cuisine that is not like anywhere else, that is both in many ways elegant and in other ways very simple, but also very flavorful and delicious. So I would go with New Orleans. Kiwi 57, third time asking again, sorry. What, if any, firearm or system that you were originally critical of have you now accepted or maybe even embraced? I'm not going to say embraced, but I am more accepting now of some of the modern Bullpup designs. The MDR really started changing my mind, and the VHS2, called the Hellion by Springfield, also really changed my mind. The FAMAS isn't bad either, but it's, of course, now a dated design that's old. But that said, so many of these Bullpups really were just trash. They're just not that great. The ergonomics aren't there. They're kind of problematic. Failures or malfunctions are unclearable. There's lots of things that go wrong with them, and they tend to be heavy for what they are, and blah, 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 blah. The MDR is, by the way, quite heavy. But the MDR, once we got that thing working, and the VHS2 are both very compelling, interesting guns that whether I don't know that I'd recommend them over an AR-15 in a more traditional system, but I don't know that they're a problem either. Like if you get really good with either of those, they're pretty dope guns. That said, the VHS2 is lighter than the MDR, but the MDR brings advantages like caliber conversion and other things. So, but I would say that I used to be very critical about Bullpups, and now I'm slightly more like, I kind of side-eye them rather than be critical of them. Adam N. What is your favorite thing about rain in the desert? Very simple, the scent. When it rains in the desert, there's this beautiful creosote scent that comes out of the creosote bushes that they get from only when it rains, and it just fills the air. First of all, it can be very hot, and then it rains, and it's immediately cooler, which is a wonderful feeling. But that creosote scent that's released from the creosote bushes is, I don't know how to put it anywhere, the magical and healing feeling. Rain in the desert is a really amazing experience, and my favorite thing is definitely the creosote scent that comes out of the bushes after the rain. Lord Bacon. As a Norwegian American, would you be willing to share some of your favorite family recipes with us? Most of us have no clue what Norwegian cuisine looks like. I do actually have a recipe book from my mother that I haven't really looked at in a long time. And maybe I will. Maybe I'll go through there and take some snapshots and just put them up for y'all. If you're interested in that, sure. I will tell you that it's not to denigrate my youth and my food of my youth, but it's pretty boring. It's not a very exciting cuisine style of cooking. I mean, there are exciting dishes, of course, and it can be elevated and all that. But very traditional Norwegian cooking is pretty simple and boring. Think of boiled potatoes, maybe even boiled fish with some sort of cream and dill sauce on top. That would be an example of a pretty standard meal. It's all in variations thereof, but nothing much more exciting than that. It's pretty simple. But yeah, maybe I will. Let me know in the comments if that's something y'all would want. Seth G. How does the Springfield Hellion compare to the Desert Tech MDR? Hey, I just answered that. Both have excellent ergonomics. Both have excellent balance. I think both are really fantastic guns. The MDR has caliber exchange capabilities if that's something you're interested in. And the Hellion is lighter. So it's really a hard call, honestly. They're both really good. Armstrong Arms. Has the frivolous lawsuit against you and KE Arms affected your life or outlook in any meaningful degree? Yes, heavily. Not to give those people any schadenfreude, but the truth is, it sucks. It has been a cloud over the heads of InRange and our work and the What Would Stoner Do project, a cloud and possible sort of Damocles, for lack of a better term, over KE Arms for the entire time. My What Would Stoner Do content has been hard or to want to do because this is sitting here like weighing over us. I've been kind of doing a little bit here and there, and of course trying to promote sales to help KE defend themselves legally. But quite honestly, this, I believe it to be, I can't say that it is, the courts will figure this out, I believe it to be frivolous. Armstrong, you called it frivolous, but this lawsuit has been depressing, demoralizing, and a real knife in the back of what was a really pleasurable, exciting, fun project. Above that, and additionally, for a person who already didn't have a lot of faith in, quote, the system, the fact that this suit continues to this day and has gone on for years, in spite of what I believe to be incontrovertible evidence of the claims being inaccurate, is demoralizing as well. The system sucks. The system is about who has more money. It isn't about who's right. Ultimately, you might win, in air quotes, when you're right at the end, but by the time to get to winning, you've been bled dry, economically speaking. Our system is gross and broken. And the fact that this is just a suit about intellectual property and manufacture of a thing makes me think to myself, holy crap. Imagine if you get caught up in the, quote, justice system or the criminal system that performs just as badly as this one. You are screwed unless you have resources. And the American system is not about justice or accuracy or being correct. It is about who has more money or power, and it is simple as that. And in regards to someone who already felt that way before going into this, and now watching this go on for years, I cannot help but think that has only reinforced my image of something that is horribly, horribly broken. So yes, it has been demoralizing and has been damaging and has been depressing and has been disappointing, and it has affected us in ways not only in terms of content creation and productivity, but in creativity and just life in general. It sucks. Matthew J. What is the chance of a DMR PCC division at a future brutality event? Maybe. We did DMR at one Desert Brutality, and it was really, people seemed to like it. And DMR with a PCC could actually bring a real interesting thing to the table, because you'd have like a little lightweight sub gun that you do like close range targets and then transition to the DMR for the long range targets. Not on the plans currently, but I would not want to say that we would never do it, because we've been very dynamic with brutality matches and keeping them hopefully fresh. Charles, what is your opinion on the LPVO as a primary sighting system on a tactical defensive rifle, and B, a competition gun? Well, the LPVO is low power variable optic, is a very important tool on a tactical weapon in the field, not because it's the best way to get quick and rapid hits. In an environment where target identification is more challenging, the ability to turn up the magnification and look at what you're aiming at or looking at is a huge tactical advantage. If there's a person walking on a hill 300 yards away, what is that person? Who is that person? Can you identify that person? Can you see what they're carrying? Something you can't do with the Mark 1 eyeball, and LPVO allows you to do that in an environment. So in regards to that, and see what's going on is a huge advantage. Is it the fastest sighting system when you're kicking in a door and engaging down hallways? Nope. Does it do it okay enough? Yes. So for real-world practical application in which target identification matters, the LPVO is a very valuable tool. And it is seen very commonly on many competition guns, especially like 3-gun environments where they have a tendency to put targets 5 feet away and then put targets 450 yards away that you can't see with the naked eye. And as a result, you have to zoom in to be able to even visually see the thing you're shooting at. That's where I think you see that in competition. However, that does not mean that the LPVO is the only and the right answer for everything. And there are many things we talked about here on the channel in terms of having no need for eye relief and red dots for sight and rapid acquisition, or even prism sights now for rapid acquisition or other reasons. Night vision's another one, and passive night vision's another one. Talk about another day, where LPVOs don't shine. LPVOs shine in that while they tend to be heavy and add weight to the gun, provide you the ability to identify targets or identify things or do visual observation with a tool on your gun that you're carrying with you. And in a tactical field environment, that is a very important thing. Something that is not usually incorporated into any form of matches because it's hard to do and isn't necessarily the focus of a match, which is about fast and accurate and speed competition, or speed and skills. But if a match were to include target identification at range, suddenly the LPVO would shine, because if you were out there with just a red dot, even a red dot with a magnifier, you're going to struggle more in a way that the person with the 1 to 10 would not. I hope that makes sense. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed this October 2022 Q&A. I'd like to thank all the Patreons for the questions they provided. Not only that, thank them for supporting the channel. Once again, InRange is completely Patreon and Utreon supported. You can find us at patreon.com/InRangeTV or Utreon if you prefer, and if you'd like to support the channel directly. And of course, we thank you for that because you're keeping this work alive. Being proactively demonetized means that YouTube does not promote the channel. In fact, they frequently shadow ban my content, and that in and of itself makes it difficult to even find new viewers, never mind new supporters. And since we don't have any advertising through YouTube, there's no money from them, so therefore it is still you that keep it alive, and we thank every one of you for that. If you can't, I totally understand. The other thing you really can do is subscribe to the channel and share with your friends, because when they shadow ban, but you share the content organically, you become the algorithm for us. Thanks for watching.